Let's be real, that was 95 minutes of our lives that we will never be getting back. That was quite simply one of the most boring games of football I have ever seen. If someone asked me what would chess look like if it was football, it was that game. Neither team wanted to lose. I think both City and Arsenal knew if the other team won, they would have the advantage in the title race, and so both teams were unwilling to let the other team score. But I think really the real winners of today are Liverpool. When you think about how they managed to beat Brighton 2-1 earlier in the day, they're now sat top of the table with a couple points clear. And I'll be honest, I think given the run of fixtures that are left, I would actually almost put Liverpool as my favourites. I also think Haaland had a really poor game today. We saw Roy Keane compare him to a League Two striker, and whilst I think that's a bit harsh, when you look at the stats, he had the least touches out of any player that started for Man City, and that's including both Ortega and Ake, who came off after 27 minutes. He only had 23 touches, which is really, really poor, and I do think that there are ways that he could have been more involved in the game and created a bit more trouble around the edge of the Arsenal box, but I'll get into that a bit more later. I think I've seen a few comparisons online and people saying that both teams set up really well. I don't know if it was just me, but it was an absolute bore fest. I don't actually think either team played brilliantly. There was a couple interesting tactics that I'll dive into that maybe were quite interesting to see. Each manager trying to get the upper hand on the other. Obviously, they're two managers that know each other quite well, but ultimately both teams just sat in a formation that would ultimately prevent the other team from really getting any clear-cut chances. I think both teams only had one shot on target. I mean, 95 minutes of Pep Guardiola versus Arteta, that is quite poor. It was almost like watching like robots just playing. It was just rondos everywhere and no actual... Nothing happened. We'll look at when Man City had the ball and when they're trying to build out from the back. They often play this kind of 3-2-5 formation or 3-3-4 formation that sometimes we see from them. And we saw something similar. So as you can see on screen now, this is kind of how both teams' formations lined up. We're going from like a Man City goal kick situation here. And what I found really interesting from Arsenal is they went man-to-man on goal kicks. So whilst they started in a 4-3-3, they actually transitioned into something a bit more like this. So it was Havertz and Odegaard as like the two strikers in a 4-4-2. Jorginho and Rice both blocked off Kovacic and Rodri. White had Foden, and it was kind of something a little bit like this. And it really prevented Ortega from having an easy out ball. There was no simple pass to any player. They didn't try and overload one side. Arsenal literally went man-to-man to try and have an instant press, and they pushed quite high. I think that was so when as soon as they could counter press. But I think what everyone noticed, which was really interesting, was how Pep Guardiola used Kovacic. And as I said, they often build up in this 3-3-4 formation. And again, we saw something similar today. So let me set it up. It was kind of something a bit like this. Almost like this 3-2-5, I guess you could say, a 3-2-4-1. But Kovacic was the one dropping deep into a left centre-back position. And I found that really interesting. Because what it kind of then meant is when Saka, and I think this was done intentionally as well from Arteta, from Pep Guardiola, sorry. When the ball came to Kovacic, Ben White often had Gvardiol on lock. And Saka, when he pressed, I'm going to set it up something a bit more like this for now. But when Saka pressed onto Kovacic, he'd make this kind of run. He'd almost do something a bit like that. Kind of curve the press a little bit. And what this meant is if you have a left-footed player here, say it's Gvardiol or Ake in this position, they're often going to try and find a ball through maybe like this, but I think Odegaard kind of had that blocked off. Otherwise, it's just a long ball into the channel for someone like Gvardiol to run onto. But by having Kovacic there instead, Rodri and Ake both shifted across into the two deep pivots, and Kovacic, who's really composed on the ball, as we know, who can progress the ball well, could either dribble with the ball into the midfield, or just by having a right-footed player, he could find the pass to Akanji or to Rodri, and quite often we'd see Silva drop deep into the midfield to find an easy pass for Kovacic, and that helped Man City build up in transition quite effectively, and it was actually something I don't think we've seen from Man City ever before, and it's probably why Kovacic started this game. Now, yes, City have had a lot of injuries, but I think by playing Kovacic deeper, someone who's really comfortable on the ball, playing long passes, short passes, and can dribble, especially when we saw at Chelsea as well. He's in the midfield, he's got really quick feet, and he can pretty much get you out of a tricky defensive situation. Arguably, there's a couple reasons why Pep Guardiola did something like this. I don't know whether it was because he preempted what Arteta was going to do, or if it just meant that they had a more composed player at the back. When you look at the injuries they've had, like John Stones, and obviously Ake went off after about half an hour, it kind of then meant that someone like Kovacic can just add that composure to a back line, especially against a high-pressing Arsenal. I think Arsenal pushed high quite a lot. It just meant that they had an easy route out from the back, and we know Man City are so good at playing out from the back as well. And what I'd really like to actually put focus on, which I think Arteta did well, is whilst they normally set up in this 4-3-3 in possession, they defended in a 4-4-2. And it was something a bit more like this. It was Jorginho. I'm going to try and set it up at roughly what it was like. Silva out on this side. A bit like this. And what this meant is it was almost like a lazy 4-4-2. And I know that doesn't really make sense, but I'm going to try and explain it to you. So in this situation, something like this, we often see Man City invert one of their centre-backs or full-backs to create this. And I talk about this so often. I think at the moment in football it's one of my favourite things to see. This box midfield. And it pretty much gives you a numerical advantage in the middle of the pitch, and that's why so many teams try and do it, and why Pep Guardiola is so good at it, because they like to play patient football, build in between the lines, and having this box midfield always means there's an extra man to try and find. But what Arteta then did, if I get rid of this, Havertz and Odegaard both played quite deep as two strikers, and actually Arsenal played incredibly compact and deep. It was almost something a bit more like this, if I can drag everyone back into position. And kind of then what this meant is that a team like Man City, who love to play through the lines, we know that they play the ball around the box, they build up patiently, they almost had no space to operate in. They'd never found that spare man. Quite often we'd see in this very, very congested midfield, Silva would be the one to drop deep to often try and pick the ball up in this position, and then Akanji would be the one to make the overlapping run on the right wing. Or we'd see Silva play it off to Akanji, and then Silva would make the overlapping run. And De Bruyne almost plays as a second striker. But again, as I said, Arsenal played so compact and so narrow. If I show you their average positions, you can see just how congested the pitch actually is. And it just meant that Man City really struggled to find them through passes to really open up the defence. And actually, Gvardiol was the player that was on the ball so often. And Ben White seemed so happy. I mean, it was probably about 20 yards deeper than what I've got it shown here. If I drop everyone back, it's not exactly correct, but something like this. Now, Silva had a really good go at Kiwior, and I think Kiwior struggled a bit today, which is why Jesus played so deep on that left mid position. He really had to help out and track either the run of Akanji or Silva. I think Kiwior struggled with, does he follow Silva or Akanji, or does he stay in his position? I think he struggled a bit with that, which is why Jesus was playing so deep. But Arsenal was so happy to let Gvardiol have the ball on this left wing position. And he's not exactly someone that's brilliant on the ball. He's not known for his crossing ability or his 1v1. He's a centre-back, realistically, playing as a left winger. And it's very typical of Pep to do something like this. But as I said, Arsenal were more than happy to let him have the ball. Ben White wasn't really pushing out to go and attack him. Instead, he was quite deep and narrow, almost just allowing Gvardiol to have this space on the left-hand side, and that's when we then saw the changes. So because Gvardiol was getting so much space, that's why Pep, I think, then brought on Grealish and Doku, because the amount of space they had wide, he wanted someone that could go 1v1, get crosses into the box, and he brought Grealish on to try and attack against Ben White, and this did kind of work. Ben White did sometimes go and push out to Grealish, but then that just meant that Jorginho or Thomas Partey, when he came on, would drop in. Jesus dropped back, and they almost created like this, for the most part of the game, Arsenal defended in a 5-3-2, or even at times, if it wasn't Jorginho that dropped in or Thomas Partey, it was then Saka playing as the right wing back. They just played in either a 5-3-2 or a 6-2-2. And you could say it's really boring football, but it worked and it was effective. And quite often it then meant Man City had nowhere to go. As we know, that they often find the small intricate passes, but when there were so many Arsenal players congesting their box, Man City really struggled, and they never really had a numerical advantage, which is something we know they always look for, that extra man, that spare man, that extra pass, and it's crucial to how Man City play, and they just couldn't do it today. What I did notice, though, is Arsenal often tried to play on the counter-attack. They played in this 4-3-3 formation that they do so often, and what I found really effective was that actually Saka, who we know is so influential in that right wing position, he actually kind of pinned Gvardiol in a bit more of a narrows position, and it was Ben White who was then overlapping. Grealish isn't known for his tracking, he doesn't run back very often, so Ben White was making these overlapping runs past Gvardiol and trying to find the cross into the box, and it also meant that the likes of Odegaard could find little holes in between the lines as well. And we know he's also so good with his feet and finding intricate passes. I don't think he had the best game, don't get me wrong. But he would find positions between the Man City defence and midfield, little pockets that he could operate in. And a couple times he found some good passes. There was that time that he found Trossard. And I think this was a defining moment of you could almost say of the title race, where Trossard is played in, and he's basically got a square pass on to, I believe, Martinelli towards the end of the game, and instead he just holds the ball up. And I don't know why, because worst comes to worst, if he plays that ball across, Martinelli misses a 1v1, but I think Trossard almost wanted the glory, or wanted to take it on himself, and when he messed up the first touch, it kind of stopped him from having that moment. And the last thing I want to get onto is Erling Haaland. As I said to you at the start of this video, Roy Keane compared him to a League 2 striker. I think that's actually a bit harsh. I mean, it's Erling Haaland. The man's got, 18 goals this season and beat records that were never expected to be broken last year. The guy's a machine. He scores goals. But I do think he has a point in that Haaland, as a footballer, in terms of working as a team, isn't actually that great. There was a couple times, and I'll try and put some screenshots on at the moment, where you can see there were small movements that he could have made to get onto the ball and find some sort of pocket around the Arsenal box to create some trouble, and he just didn't. Saliba and Gabriel both marked him very well, to a point where he almost just never really had a chance. He had a couple shots, but nothing really threatening. And I mean, we go to that big chance that I can't remember what part of the game it was on. I think it was around about the 85th minute. Maybe it was a bit earlier on, when that ball comes in and he misses the ball completely. You know, if that's De Bruyne in that situation on his left foot, he's playing a ball across the goal, and good chance that that's getting then tapped in by Haaland. The fact that he missed that pass, which for a Man City player on his form, you'd maybe expect. I don't think he had the best game. I think calling him a League 2 striker is incredibly harsh, obviously. It's Erling Haaland, but he did have some problems today, I think. I think Arsenal dealt with him very well. And I predicted he was going to be the match winner, so actually I was very wrong on that front. Arsenal and Arteta did really well to cancel out the effect of Haaland. But I think we can basically, from this match, realise that was the most boring 95 minutes of football ever, with literally nothing happening. But also just understand how Liverpool now have the advantage in this title race. I always favoured Man City for the title charge, but actually it is Liverpool now, for me, that are the ones to lose it. Let me know what you guys think. Are Man City out of the title race now because of this game? I think that's a bit presumptuous. Who do you think is going to win it? What did you guys think of the game? I'm assuming you agreed with me in that it was a complete boring 95 minutes of football. But yeah, fair play to both teams. They did what they had to do, I guess, and a point each, probably deserved. Let me know what you guys think. I'm sorry that I haven't uploaded in a couple weeks. getting back home for Easter and everything, just sorting stuff out. But I'm back, and hopefully a lot more content to come your way very soon. Make sure you click that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you guys very soon with another video. Thank you for watching.